For almost 20 years, it wasn't about land or oceans. The biggest fight on Earth was for what was above it. We're talking about the space race, of course. This incredible rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union was so much more than just a competition. It was this high-stakes game of technology, politics, and pure grit that literally pushed humanity to places we'd only ever dreamed of. But here's the thing. You probably think you know how this story goes, right? It ends with an American flag planted on the moon, but what if that's not the whole story, or even the most important part? For a long, long time, the story of space exploration wasn't being written in English. It was being written in Russian, on the other side of the Iron Curtain. So, let's get into it. This Sputnik shock. The race didn't kick off with some big formal announcement. Nope, it started with a sound. Just a simple beep. A beep coming from space that would change absolutely everything. Okay, so picture this. It's October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union launches Sputnik 1. It's basically a 184-pound metal ball. All it did was circle the Earth and send out that little radio signal. But, oh man, the impact was huge. It was like a shockwave. People in America could actually go outside, look up, and see this little dot moving across the night sky. They could tune their radios and hear it beep, beep, beep. It was this constant reminder flying right over their heads that the Soviets were now winning the technology race. And that was terrifying. And this brings us to the next phase, a flurry of Soviet firsts. Because Sputnik wasn't just a lucky shot, not even close. It was just the beginning. For the next 8 years, the Soviets absolutely dominated space, leaving the United States completely stunned and scrambling to figure out what to do next. I mean, the pace was just relentless. Check this out. A month after Sputnik, they put the first animal in orbit, the dog Laika. A couple of years later, they became the first to actually hit the moon with a probe. Then came the really big ones. Yuri Gagarin, the first human being in space, Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman, Alexei Leonov, the first person to do a spacewalk. It was just boom, 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 one major victory after another. And just to give you an idea of how big the gap was, let's look at the first humans in space. The Soviets send Yuri Gagarin on a full orbit around the entire planet, 100 minutes. A month later, America sends up Alan Shepard. Now, what he did was incredible, don't get me wrong, but his flight was just a 15-minute hop up and down. It didn't even go into full orbit. So yeah, you can see just how far ahead the Soviets really were at this point. All right, so America is falling behind. Big time. National pride is on the line. They realized that just trying to catch up wasn't going to cut it. They had to change the rules of the game. They needed a goal so big, so completely audacious, that it would reset the entire race. The first thing they did was get organized. In 1958, President Eisenhower created NASA. This was a huge deal because it took all these different scattered space projects, many of them military, and put them under one civilian roof. Suddenly, all of America's brainpower, all the best scientists and engineers were focused on one single mission. And then came the big moment. Think about this. Just a few weeks after Alan Shepard's little 15-minute flight, President Kennedy goes in front of Congress and lays down this absolutely mind-blowing challenge. He says that America should commit to landing a man on the moon and bringing him home safely before the end of the decade. This wasn't just about science. This was JFK drawing a line in the sand and telling the whole world, we are going to win. So how were they going to pull this off? Well, NASA came up with a step-by-step plan. First up was Project Mercury. This was all about the basics. Can a person even survive in space? The answer was a definite yes. Next came Project Gemini. And this was the really tricky part. This is where astronauts learned how to fly in space, not just be passengers. They figured out how to meet up and connect two spaceships traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. They learned how to do spacewalks. You couldn't even think about going to the moon without mastering these skills first. All of this was practice for the main event, Project Apollo. And the amount of money they threw at this, it's just staggering. The Apollo program cost $25.4 billion back then. To put that in perspective, that's over $150 billion today, an absolutely massive investment. And it wasn't just money. It took over 400,000 people working together to make it happen. So, the stage is set, the money is there, the plan is in motion. This is it, the final sprint to the moon. The entire planet is watching. Who is going to get there first? But while America's program was hitting its stride, the Soviet effort started to run into huge problems. First, their lead designer, a genius named Sergei Korolev, the guy behind Sputnik and Gagarin's flight, he died suddenly. And then their moon rocket, the N-1, which was supposed to be their version of the Saturn V, it just kept failing. It blew up on the launch pad 4 different times. These disasters basically took them out of the race to the moon. And with the path now clear, it was time for Apollo 11. On July 16, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins blasted off. The hopes of an entire nation, maybe even the world, were riding with them on that 4-day trip to the moon. The landing itself was incredibly tense. Armstrong literally had to take manual control to steer the lunar module, the Eagle, away from a crater filled with giant boulders. And then that calm voice came over the radio, heard all around the world. The Eagle has landed. Can you imagine? Some 650 million people were listening in. That was the biggest audience for anything ever at that time. And then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Neil Armstrong steps out onto the surface of the moon and says those immortal words. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Just like that, America had done it. They had won the race to the moon. But, believe it or not, the story doesn't stop there. So, the race is won, now what? Well, what happened next is maybe just as interesting. The fiery competition that got us to the moon started to cool down and morph into something completely different. See, after Apollo 11, we sent 5 more missions to the moon, with the last one being Apollo 17 in 1972. But after that, the excitement kind of faded. Budgets got slashed, and the focus changed. It stopped being about beating the other guy and started being about working together. And this all led to an amazing moment in 1975. An American Apollo spacecraft and a Soviet Soyuz spacecraft met up in orbit and docked. The 2 commanders, one American, one Soviet, opened the hatches and shook hands. In space. This handshake in space was the perfect symbol. The race was officially over. A new era of cooperation had begun. Which really makes you think, doesn't it? The whole thing started as this bitter, ideological Cold War fight, but it ended with a handshake in orbit. So, what did winning the space race actually mean? Was it just about being the first to plant a flag? Or was the real victory pushing all of humanity forward to a place where we could finally start working together to reach for the stars?